So how come, dear brothers and sisters, Bismillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. My bad. I just wanted to go quickly live today to discuss. I mean, obviously in Pakistan there are discussions that Sheikh Albani didn't have any sheikh, so obviously some blind followers, they're questioning Sheikh Albani's scholarship. And as well, it always comes, sometimes we speak to youngsters and we say to them, Sheikh Albani did this, Sheikh Albani or Sheikh Ibn Baz did this, or many other scholars did this. And, they might say, these scholars, they didn't know Salafiyah. So, this is a question that we're asking people. That have we studied in depth the biographies of the major scholars? Many people will take snippets of some scholars. And while there's many other statements in their life and how they interacted with other scholars, for which people have to research themselves and read, even if they can't read Arabic and read Sheikh Albani's Fatawa. You have in English a book published by Darussalam, which I will really recommend, written by Abu Nasir Ibrahim Abdallah and Abu Maryam Muslim Amin, but it has been verified by a student of Sheikh Albani, Sheikh Muhammad Al-Amin Al-Halil. So it discusses the biography of Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani. And Sheikh Albani, in it, he discusses, first of all, what the blind followers say, that he doesn't have an ijazah. It says on page 29, Sheikh Albani used to attend discussion hadith with some scholars like the great historian muhaddith of Halab, Sheikh Muhammad Raghib al-Tabbah, who was a great Hanafi scholar. So first of all, Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani took ijazah from Hanafi scholars. So for our own brothers, they will never take ijazah from a Hanafi scholar. But Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani, whom many of the youth consider as a reference, and he was without any doubt one of the leading scholars, scholar of the previous century. He took ijazah from a Hanafi scholar from his time in Syria. So he says, when Sheikh Raghib saw the dexterity of this young man, he gave him a certificate, confirmation to narrate knowledge from him. Sheikh Albani did not allow this certification to content him. Rather, he used to say, "This certification as a scholar never meant anything to me. We only used to cite it as a refutation of the arguments of those rancorous to us." And it says in footnotes that Sheikh Raghib's certification was on the authority of Abu Ma'ali Muhammad Badr ibn Yusuf al-Hassani Dimashqi. In chain of transmission goes back to Imam Ahmad, which is, ultimately linked up to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A copy of the ijazah is in possession of his student Sheikh Ali Hassan Abdul Hamid Halabi al-Athari. Okay, and second footnote, those who claim Sheikh Albani said from books without authority and ijazah. So it just shows that, and there is a 5-minute audio as well on YouTube. If you type the name Albani and Tabah, Sheikh Albani does a 5 minutes audio in which Sheikh Albani will explain how he obtained this ijazah of Sheikh Tabah. So Sheikh Tabah, he was a leading muhaddith of his era. And Sheikh Albani, it's a 5 minutes clips in Arabic. You can listen. He said, I used to listen to a person from the Muslim Brotherhood, and when I was young, and then he took me to Sheikh Tabah and he praised him to me, and Sheikh Tabah asked me to read some books of hadith, and then that's how I obtained this ijazah. I met him in a hotel. So this 4-5 minutes clip is on YouTube. If you type Sheikh Albani, he will tell how he obtained this ijazah from the great muhaddith, Hanafi muhaddith of Syria, Sheikh Muhammad Raghib Tabah. Sheikh Muhammad Raghib Tabah, he took as well early hadith scholars from India, Pakistan. Sheikh Abdul Tawwab Multani took ijazah from him as well. So he was he was a great scholar, and he was Salafi minded. He used to love Ibn Taymiyyah and Hafiz Ibn al-Qayyim. So he took Badruddin Hassani. So they were Salafi minded scholars, but they were Hanafi in fiqh. And Sheikh Zuhair Shawish told that Sheikh Zuhair, he was a student as well of Sheikh Muhammad Raghib al-Tabbah, and he said that he was Salafi, and that there are some books published of him. So he was one of the leading Muhaddis Hanafi Salafi. Like Sheikh many of our youngsters, they understand Hanafi means he's Ashari, which is wrong, because Sheikh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah had Hanafi students who were Salafi. So like Ibn Abillah is Hanafi, whose Shara is studied in Indo-Pak Madaris. So in Sham, there were always a tradition of Hanafi scholars who were upon the creed of the Salaf. And so Sheikh Albani took ijazah from a Hanafi scholar who was Salafi minded. But this is why when I said to the youngsters, when the youngsters, they say Salafi scholars, this is why I say we need to study the biography of the giant scholars of Salafis, of Sham, of Egypt, of other places, to see how they dealt in their era. You understand? Like if Hafiz Mizzi, Hafiz Ibn Kathir, and this tradition of and Sheikh Albani mentioned that when he took him to Sheikh Tabakh, and he said, I'm humbly minded, because Sheikh Tabakh didn't know Sheikh Albani, but the scholar who knew Sheikh Albani used to attend his lessons. He said he took me to Sheikh Tabakh, and he said he's humbly minded, meaning he's not like he's on good aqidah. So you can listen to the clip of Sheikh Albani. If someone has time, it will be a 4 minutes clip. It's good. He translated himself, So he took him. So this tradition of Salafi scholars in Sham, some of them were Hanafis. You have to see that many of them had teachers. He took ijazah from Sheikh Abdul Hayy Qattani and others, scholars of the era. So you have to study, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago. How did the Salafi behave? Which teachers they had, which students they have, how do they behave in their society, why they were scholars of all school of thought. Because in societies, there's only Salafis, then it's easier to say, okay. But even in societies in which there's only Salafis, like in Saudi Arabia, they invite Ash'ari scholars. So Sheikh Muhammad Raghib al-Tabbah, he, not only Sheikh Albani, Sheikh Zuhair Shawish, who are Salafi, were his students, but as well Muhammad Ali Sabuni and Sheikh Abu Fatah Abdul Ghuda, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, who was Ash'ari leaning. He was his student as well. So Salafi-minded scholar, he even Sheikh Abdul Tawwab Multani sent him the copies of Tuhfatul Ahwazi, and then he asked Sheikh Abdul Tawwab Multani to give me the ijazat of Sheikh Abdurrahman Mubarak Puri in Hadith. So the Salafi-minded Hanafi scholars, they had no issue to teach people who are Ash'ari, like Sheikh Muhammad Ali Sabuni and or Sheikh Abu Ghuda. And Sheikh Abu Ghuda, he went to India, he went to Sindh, he visited the Maktaba of Sheikh Muhibbullah Shah Rashidi, and it is written in Maqala Rashidiyya. He said, I have never seen such a Maktaba, there's rare books of hadith in it. My heart was in his praise of the Maktaba of Sheikh Muhibbullah Shah Rashidi, the elder brother and teacher. It's written in the Maktaba, and his letter in Arabic has been written in Maqalat Rashidiyya, Bahr al-Ulum, in the biography of Sheikh Muhibbullah Shah Rashidi. So our scholars, whether they're Ahl Hadith or Salafi, they never said to a scholar, I will not shake your hand, I will not give ijazah. Some Salafi scholars gave ijazah to Sheikh Abu Ghuda, Abdul Fattah, who was Ash'ari Aqidah. So this type of thinking, like out there, some youngsters, they said that Salaf didn't even look at their faces. What do you mean by they didn't even look at their faces? You understand? You have to study the biography of the scholars, see how they interacted. So Sheikh Tabakh, he was Salafi minded, but according to the definition of youngsters, because he used to sit with all the scholars, teach them, he would not be classified as Salafi scholar. Sheikh Muhammad Mustafa Azami, who has done great work, Orientalist. Some of our Salafi brothers, they say his minhaj was not good. He used to sit with Sheikh Abu Ghuda, he used to sit with the Deobandis, his minhaj was not good. So according to them, he was not upon good minhaj. And you can Google his name and what Salafis about him. And they will say, those who are extreme in Tabdi, that Sheikh Muhammad Mustafa Azami's minhaj was not good. So all these great scholars, they used to sit with scholars of other masalik, take ijaza or give ijaza. A Salafi scholar, one of the greatest muhaddith of Sham, from whom Sheikh Albani took ijaza, he would give his ijaza to Ash'ari scholars. He had no issue. And obviously you give ijaza of someone who studies with you, so you have to see his face. You understand? He didn't say, I don't even look at the face of Ash'ari scholars. Hafiz al-Mizi and others that taught Ash'ari scholars, Hafiz ibn Kathir taught Subki. So all this stuff, it needs to come in English, because our youngsters, they need to know how scholars they interacted in their time with Ash'ari scholars. Sheikh Albani took ijaza from Sheikh Muhammad Raghib Tabbah, who gave ijaza to Ash'ari scholars. You understand? Likewise, Sheikh Abdul Ghaffar Hassan, he left Jamaat Islami because he had differences on the political views of Sheikh Maulana Maududi, but all the leading Deobandi scholars, it's written in his biography in Urdu, in his interview, he's saying that all, Maulana Yusuf Binuri, all the others, they used to come and visit me in Medina. So the exchange between scholars, Sheikh Albani used to give visits from scholars who have other orientations, you understand? So this type of thinking that scholars never sat together, scholars never sat with Ash'aris or Maturidis, it never existed, this type of thinking. Number two, this is Sheikh Albani. So he took ijaza from a scholar who was Salafi minded, a Hanafi. But this scholar, he was the teacher of Sheikh Abu Ghudda as well, and Sheikh Muhammad Ali Sabuni. So this was the common practice of Salafi scholars to give ijazat. Many of them had ijazat from Ash'ari Maturidis, and many gave ijazat to Ash'ari Maturidis. They never looked, because I have differences in Aqidah with him, I would not teach him Aqidah or others. Now on page 66 of the same book, how did Sheikh Albani behave with his contemporary scholars? So not only Sheikh Albani, because I was speaking to about Sheikh Muhammad Mustafa Azami, who some brothers say his minhaj is not good. He used to sit with all schools of thought. Sheikh Albani, he requested Sheikh Albani when he was teaching Al-Qura to check his tahqiq of Ibn Khuzaymah. And Sheikh Albani checked, is present in the Muqaddimah. The name of Sheikh Mustafa Azami, Sheikh Albani is present on the book. So you're saying Sheikh Muhammad Mustafa Azami's minhaj was bad, but it didn't stop Sheikh Albani from doing tahqiq of his book. Likewise, Sheikh Albani, if you read the introduction of the book Fiqh Sirah of Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali, Sheikh Albani volunteered to do takhrij of his book because it was a popular book. So obviously, sometimes after Sheikh Albani criticized him that his minhaj, he didn't accept all takhrij, he only accept hadith which are against the aqal, and even he accept weak hadith which goes against the aqal. Sheikh Albani, after in his Muqaddamah Sifat Salat Nabi, he criticized some of the aqlani views of Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali. But at the time he volunteered to do takhrij for Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali, he knew Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali was an Ash'ari scholar. Now in the same book, which is published by Dar es Salaam, it says a number of meetings have been recorded between Sheikh Albani and Dr. Yusuf Al-Qaradawi, where matters of knowledge were discussed. Okay, it's not me saying it, it's this book which is published and verified by the students of Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani. Where matters of, sometimes, and there's even on YouTube, there are some videos, he said Sheikh Muhammad Yusuf Qaradawi, Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali, they have some knowledge of fiqh, but they don't have knowledge of hadith, or their weakening should not be taken by people, and I met Yusuf Qaradawi and I discussed some issues with him. So it says here, it says in the book, so not only it is on YouTube, that in which Sheikh Albani mentioned some of his meetings with Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi. And Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, he's upon the Aqidah of Tafwid, which is well known. He's not upon the Aqidah of Isbat, upon the Athari Aqidah. So this book, it's approved by the student of Sheikh Albani. It says a numbers of meetings have also been recorded between Sheikh Albani and Dr. Yusuf Al-Qaradawi. And now our brothers, they said they don't even look at the faces of people of other school of thought. They would never sit. Okay. And it's in English. You should buy books, should read, instead of listening to podcasts of brothers. Buy books and read books. You will learn so much by taking time and do your own research. Be curious. Try to think what happened. How things worked 100 years ago. You have to be questioning things instead of adapting whatever your group is saying. Try to research. Try to be critical thinking. This is what Sheikh Albani encouraged. Sheikh Albani, in one of the meeting of in an audio of one of our scholars, which was launched a few weeks ago, he said there was a meeting between him and Sheikh Abbad, and they discussed the hadith of that Allah created Adam upon the surah of Allah, and whether the article goes to Allah or to Adam. And Sheikh Albani said that for him, he had a different views from the Hanbalis. And they quoted him, but Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah said that Imam Ahmad said, whoever says that the attribute, his refers to the creation, other than Allah, he's a Jahmi. And Sheikh Albani said, I'm not a muqallid of Imam Ahmad. So Sheikh Albani, he always, on many small issues, he differed from great scholars. So, and this is what Sheikh Albani encouraged people. He never told people to do taqlid of me. He gave his arguments and would defend them, but he would never impose his views on others and do tabdi or whoever differs with him. You understand? So it says in this book, a number of meetings have been recorded between Sheikh Albani and Dr. Yusuf Al-Qaradawi, where matters of knowledge were discussed. Sometimes Dr. Yusuf Al-Qaradawi met him to verify the authenticity of a hadith, relying so much on some verification. So my accent is not good, sorry brother. So what they're saying is Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, who is not Salafin Aqidah, he's upon the Aqidah of Tafwid. Like we have some Tafwidi Hanbalis nowadays. So Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, to verify some hadith, he would rely on Sheikh Albani's tahqiq, okay, and he will ask him. Sometimes in some programs, he would say, meaning Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi would say, I have asked concerning the authenticity of this hadith from a Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani. So in some international gatherings, Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, when discussing some hadith, he would say, I have asked him, meaning directly. Now Sheikh Albani won't say, because he doesn't have the same aqidah as me, I will not do tahqiq of his book, I will not reply to him, I will not shake his hands, I will boycott him like some of our youngsters are pushing towards. And it says even Sheikh Hassan al-Banna wrote to Sheikh Albani commenting on his efforts and commentary and critique of some of the Sharia rulings published in the magazine. It says that Sheikh Hassan al-Banna wrote to Sheikh Albani commenting his efforts on his commentary and critique on some of the so there was some correspondence between Sheikh Hassan al-Banna and Sheikh Albani, because Sheikh Albani, he would comment on he would write some notes on Fiqh Sunnah of Sheikh Said Sabiq on the rulings of some hadiths which were published in the magazine of the Ikhwan. And so there was correspondence between scholars. And says students of various Islamic science pursuing different degrees from university across the Muslim world would regularly consult Sheikh Albani on difficult areas benefiting from his vast knowledge of hadith. Sheikh Amin al-Misri, the head of hadith graduate studies faculty, University of Medina, and one-time hadith lecturer, University of Syria, Dr. Ahmad Hassan, Dr. Mahmoud Tahan, professor hadith of University of Medina. All these people, they would consult Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani, write to him or call him. All these academics around the world. So nowadays, people are saying, if a scholar is Ash'ari, you should not even sit with him. So how would Sheikh Albani reply to them? To the verification. Sheikh Albani himself volunteered to do tahqiq of the book Fiqh al-Sirah of Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali, knowing that he was Ash'ari. So our youngsters, some of them, they will say, Sheikh Muhammad, many other scholars, Salafi scholars, Sheikh Taqiyuddin Hilali used to write in the magazine of Ikhwan. So you can write in the magazines. Sheikh Abdul Razak Afif in his biography, he said that he used to teach in the magazines. But someone will say, oh, you can teach with them, but with a layman, not with the scholars. Because the hujjah is established on the scholars, the layman, because some people, they make rules. Oh, the hujjah was not established on Ibn Daqiq al-Eid. Though Ibn Daqiq al-Eid sat with, he had many times he had sittings with Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah and many other scholars. So Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah didn't say, oh, this time I sat with you because the hujjah is not established. Next time you come to me, sorry, I have to decline this. I will establish first the hujjah on you, and then you won't sit with me. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, first of all, he had Ash'ari Maturidi teachers, and he had sittings with them, meetings with Ash'ari scholars. Hafiz Mizi and the Dhahabi and Ibn Kathir, they had Ash'ari students. They had the occasion to establish the hujjah on them. So this stuff was because the hukum was not implemented on them, and because the hujjah was not, that's why these scholars sat with them. But once you establish the hujjah on them and you give the hukum of tafdid, now you can't sit with them. All these scholars who gave takhrij, they didn't say, or they had the occasion to. And first of all, this stuff is totally false, because, Hafiz ibn Hajar, he quote extensively from the books of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. All these scholars, and some of them said that, the Salaf, they were more knowledgeable, but the Ash'aris, the Maslak of the Khalaf is more intelligent, it's more brighter. You understand? It's not that they don't know the statements of the Salaf. They know the statements of the Salaf. That they will mention the statement of Imam Darimi and Imam others against Jahmiyyah. They will quote them. So Hafiz ibn Hajar and all the scholars, they were well aware of Ibn Taymiyyah's book. And they would quote them, many of them, that Ibn Taymiyyah said this in Shara, Hadith Nuzul and others. So saying that the scholars only sat with the Ash'aris because they had no access, which is totally false. Or because they didn't establish hujjah, what's preventing them from establishing hujjah? And now someone says, oh, but you can teach in the masjid of innovator to the layman. But what if the imam of the masjid, who is a graduate from Al-Azhar, he sits in you teaching hadith in a central masjid? What if the imam is Azhari and is Ash'ari and he sits in your lessons on Tawheed or your lessons on hadith? So, some people, they just make up some excuses to say that Sheikh Albani or Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah didn't understand Salafiyah, and they neither read, they study the biography of the scholars. Yes, Sheikh Albani criticized them, the mistakes of Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali, but he did takhrij for them. He did takhrij for Sheikh Muhammad Mustafa Azami. He did takhrij of his book of Ibn Khuzaymah, and according to the youngster, Sheikh Muhammad Mustafa Azami would sit with everyone. He was not, according to that definition, he's not Salafi. He took ijazah from Sheikh Muhammad Tabah, who gave ijazah to Sheikh Abu Ghudda as well. So, this is just to show you some examples of how the scholars interacted. And, the greatest scholars of our time study the biographies, the greatest scholars of Sham, the greatest scholars of Egypt, the greatest scholars of Yemen, Sheikh Muallimi. See how they went to India and did tahqiq works. The first tahqiq of Musnad Abu Awama, it was published by the Nadwis in India, by Dar al-Ma'arif Osmania, which was one of the Nawab. He was rich, so he paid different scholars to publish this book. Sheikh Muallimi worked years for them. And he interacted with the other scholars of Nadwa. He didn't say, oh, because you sit with the Deobandis, you sit with this one. Our youngsters is, oh, this one sits with this. Though he has good aqidah, or because he sits with this one who sits with the Deobandi, so everyone is cancelled. Sheikh Muallimi, he sat with scholars who's, for Sheikh Taqiyuddin Nadwi and others. That was not, at this time, the enlightened Salafi scholars, that was not their thinking. You understand? Salafi scholars, they gave ijazah to Sheikh Abu Ghudda. They did takhrij for Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi when they asked him. They had meetings with him to discuss issues. So, saying such statements, sometimes I'm shocked. I mean, if Sheikh Albani was alive today, many youngsters, they will rule him out of Salafiyah. So this is why we make dua for the youth, and we encourage them. It's approved by the student of Sheikh Albani. You can read it and see how the leading scholars of our time, how they had meetings with all the scholars around the world, how they took ijazah. Sheikh Abu Turab Zahiri said he went to Morocco, and how they took ijazahs from different scholars around the world. Read the biography of our scholars and see that they give ijazah to Asharis, they took ijazahs from Asharis. So this type of thinking, I mean, we can only make dua for the youth. May Allah save our youth and make them productive. Teach to the ummah with kindness, with softness, spread compassion and harmony. Try to educate people rather than giving hukm of people, or this one, if he doesn't take my line, drop him, or this one, or if he doesn't boycott this one, if he goes to conference with this one, boycott him. This exists among the youth. This never existed among the major scholars of our times. Even not today. You can see pictures of them in international conferences with scholars of other mazahib. It never existed even among the Saudi scholars. It never existed about the major scholars of Sham. It never existed among any scholar in India, Pakistan. This type of thinking was never present. Yes, they would refute those who make a mistake. They will write against him. You understand that you're making a mistake, on this issue. And that they will advise each other, they will debate each other. But, it didn't cancel them from benefiting from each other's and participating to common political or ilmi project. So this is why I want to end on this. And just Salafis, our young brothers, just read the biography of Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani. And this would be enough for the youngsters to live the fikr of ghulu and all these issues. Wa sallallahu ala nabi. Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Dear brothers and sisters, inshallah, I just wanted before Salat Jummah to do a quick live stream carrying on of my topic of yesterday. Because alhamdulillah, on my articles on the scholars, how they interacted, how they did politics with other groups, how they even introduced some of them, had their books introduce some of our major scholars, by Hanafi Deobandi scholars, like Sheikh Hafiz Al-Hadin Yusuf had his book on the mistakes of Maulana Maududi, Khilafat al-Mulukiyat ki Tarikhi wa Shari Haysiyat. He had it introduced by Maulana Yusuf Binori, one of the leading Deobandi muhaddith. So, and many other of our scholars had books introduced, like the book Din al-Haq of which was written by Maulana Dawood Arshad, which was written about the book Ja'al Haq of the Brailvi scholar Muhammad Yar Khan Naimi. So lots of brothers over the years I have been writing, I guess, the Ghulat and Ghulu and Tabdi Association and all these issues, and defending early Hadith scholars for them working in the European Fiqh Council and all this stuff. So I've been, in the last 20 years, alhamdulillah, I have been translating this on Ahya Forum and other places, defending all our scholars from Allama Ihsanillah Zahir to Hafiz Zubair Ali Zai and all others. So alhamdulillah, lots of brothers, they texted me privately that by reading your posts and articles, alhamdulillah, we left, this fikr of Ghulu in Tabdi and others. So they're very beneficial. So alhamdulillah, if I can benefit people and leaving some cults or some people extreme in tabdi of the scholars. So I'm just mentioning facts. I can be wrong in mentioning some facts, and I'm open to corrections if a brother tells me. If I write, okay, these scholars attended this conference in Al-Azhar. If you say, okay, it's wrong, then I can correct myself. Or Maulana Mukhtar Nadvi, the book is published by Naimi Kutub Khana. They invited some Brailvi scholars, and after they added an article of Pir Karam Shah Brailvi, but they invited Deobandi Jamaat Islami and the heads of Deobandi Jamaati, and some Bravery scholars were agreeing on triple talaq, and it is published in a book form. And the son of Maulana Safraz Khan Safdar, he was invited by some of our scholars on a conference on the Quran, and Maulana Zahid Rashidi from Gujranwala. He's a well-known, respected Mu'tadil Hanafi scholar, Deobandi, and he was invited, and it is published in the form of a book. People can buy this book, you know, the in which the article of Maulana Safraz Safdar Khan's son was invited. So, you know, I'm just presenting facts. After, you know, I'm not telling you you should invite or you should go. You understand? I'm just giving you some options. I am empowering you. I'm giving you some ijtihadat, some views of scholars, how they went, how they invited, how they cooperated, how they introduced. After, it's up to you. If you say, look, I follow the ijtihad of other scholars, it's perfectly fine. But now if you take other scholars out of Salafiyah, or say their Salafiyah is weaker because they're following the majority view of the scholars on these issues, you know, and they understand the narrations of the Salaf, they only apply in a context or in a society where Ahl Sunnah majority, and boycotting them will make those who have Asharis, they will make them hinder. So now Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani, there's other facts which I have read somewhere, and I will look for them and I will present. Not only I have shown yesterday from the book, it's not my book, it's a book written and it's available in English. You know, it's not something I want to empower the youth with. But I am just showing you how Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani, you know, I'm not speaking what hukum he gave on them, whether they're from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah or not. You know, leave this debate. We're agreeing these scholars are Asharis. Yes, we are all agreeing. You know, these scholars are Asharis. You understand? Leave the debate of whether, you know, this scholar or this group, you know, Sheikh Hassan al-Banna is Ahl Sunnah. No, leave this debate. I'm just telling you, did Sheikh Albani have correspondence? Yes. With the Sheikh Hassan al-Banna, he had tafwid in Aqidah. So you agree Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani had correspondence. Okay. You agree that he volunteered to introduce the book of Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali. Leave the hukum. Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali, knowing he was a Shari, yes. Now, even there are proofs and evidences that Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani received Deobandi scholars in his house. Sheikh Habibur Rahman Azami, who even, you know, he was a leading Deobandi muhaddis from India. He visited Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani, stayed in his house. So Sheikh Albani not only had correspondence, academics around the world, whatever aqidah they have, whatever minhaj they have, they would write Sheikh Albani, call him to inquire about some hadith, you know, from different, for whether the academics are Professor Sheikh Mahmoud Taha and others, leave their minhaj and aqidah. Sheikh Albani would always help people, whatever in academic issues, in whatever was good, he would help them. And he would host scholars from around the world, Sheikh Habibur Rahman Azami. And I will show all the evidences, but it is well-known factors. I read it in an article that Sheikh Habibur Rahman Azami came to his house and they discussed on, you know, he hosted him. So now you're going to say, oh, this scholar is hosting a Deobandi scholar, he's going to the janazah, he's out of Salafiyah. No, you know, and our youngsters nowadays, especially our youngsters nowadays, now that I have shown you that the muhaddis of Halab, Sheikh Raghib Tabah, who was a Salafi Hanafi scholar, he was teaching Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani, gave him ijazah. Now, would you take an ijazah from a Hanafi Salafi scholar who has Ashari teachers? Would nowadays the young brothers who have lots of zeal for the da'wah, they might have a good intention. Will they invite a Hanafi Salafi scholar, or will they give him an ultimatum, a diktat? First, you have to boycott your Ashari students. Else I won't take ijazah from you. I won't invite you on my podcast. I won't invite you in my program. You know, I will boycott you, and I will tell all the masajid to boycott Sheikh Tabah until Sheikh Tabah stops teaching his Ashari students. You understand? That's what's going on. That a speaker is a teacher in a place. He's not agreeing with another one until he boycotts the other one, who is Ashari. No one should invite him, and anyone who tries to invite him, he will be out of Salaf. Because people do this tabdi by association. So, Sheikh Tabah had good aqidah. He was not Ashari. he had some students who were Asharis. No, Sheikh Albani didn't tell Sheikh Tabar, you have to toe my line. If you don't boycott your Ashari students, I won't take ijazah from you. Now that's what youngsters are doing nowadays to scholars. That if you don't boycott your Ashari students, I won't invite you to my place, and I will tell all my brothers and my groups not to invite them, and I would pressurize them. You know, I will give a warning against them if they don't toe the line of my cult leader. The Nasiruddin Albani, he hosted Hanafi Deobandi scholars, like I've told you, Habibullah Rahman Azam in his house. He had all the academics around the world, whatever their aqidah was, whether it was Muhammad Ghazali, whether it was another one, Mahmoud Tahan, whoever had a question, he would write to him, he would reply to him in a conference meeting. They will discuss issues regarding hadith and other issues. So, you know, the way Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani behaved with his contemporary scholars, no youngsters is behaving like Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani nowadays. Nowadays, scholars are saying, if Sheikh Tabar was alive today, the youngsters, they will say to Sheikh Tabar, until you boycott your Ashari students, you stop teaching them, we won't invite you and we won't take ijazah from you. Because you're not a clear Salafi. A clear Salafi is the one who doesn't look at the faces of Asharis. He's the one who boycotts them. Now, I've told you that some of our scholars had books introduced by Deobandi scholars. Some of our scholars had students like Sheikh Abdul Jabbar Ghaznavi, Arif Billah. You know, these scholars, they were people fearing Allah. You know, they were not people. And they were, when someone makes a scholar, they will take a stand against Sheikh Sanal Amrisari. You know, they were not scholars who say, okay, you can be Ashari, that's fine. You can have Ashari Tawilat. No, Sheikh Abdul Jabbar Ghaznavi wrote a book, Al-Arba'in fi anna Sanal laysa ala mazhab al-muhaddithin. And Sheikh Abdullah Ropri translated this book and sent it to King Abdulaziz. And King Abdulaziz, they said, okay, Sheikh Sanallah is making mistakes. I will form a committee of scholars with Sheikh Bahjat Baitar, Sheikh Rashid Rida, Allama Sheikh Rashid Rida. And Alhamdulillah, they had a meeting with the Ghaznavis and Sheikh Sanallah Madasari and the King Abdulaziz, who was a genuine Ahl Hadith scholars. You know, King Abdulaziz, he was a real Ahl Hadith scholar because he would pray 11 rakat Tarawih, he would read Tuhfatul Ahwazi, and he would invite in his conferences, he would invite Deobandi scholars, Nadvi scholars, Hanafi scholars in his conferences. King Abdulaziz was practicing the Ahl Hadith manhaj. You understand, when he did international conferences, he invited all the scholars around the world. You know, no one ever blamed him for inviting scholars who have some other views from other schools of thought. So what I'm saying to you is, these people, it's not that they're not refuting people who have Asharism. They are refuting. Sheikh Albani is refuting Muhammad Ghazali. He is refuting Sheikh Yusuf Qardawi's mistake. He is refuting Sheikh Hassan al-Banna's mistakes. He is refuting the Asharis. But he's not applying this rule, if you don't boycott your Ashari student, I will boycott you. If you don't, you understand? He will. And number two, Sheikh Albani received people in his house. Nowadays, the youngsters, if they see Ahl Hadith scholars receiving a Deobandi in his house, straight away outside Manhaj. Oh, he had a cup of tea with the Deobandi scholar, he was in a conference with the Deobandi scholar, straight out of the Manhaj. You understand? Sheikh Albani, why did he receive a Deobandi scholar in his house? Sheikh Habibur Rahman Azami, Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani. Either you have to say Sheikh Nasiruddin Albani didn't understand Salafiyah for receiving Hanafi scholars in his house, you know, or you're saying Sheikh Albani didn't know. So, you know, and secondly, I've shown to you already, I've shown to brothers that our scholars had books introduced by Hanafi scholars on a common issue. Sheikh Muhammad Hussain Batalvi, when he wrote the fatwa of takfir against Mirza Qadiani, he went to all the scholars from all schools of thought and had the first muttafiqa fatwa of takfir against Mirza Ghulam Qadiani. And the leading Deobandi scholars, the leading even other, the brave, they all signed it. So, and it was published by Ahl Hadith scholars. You understand? Now there's many other Ash'ari scholars, like Sheikh Muhammad Abu Zahra Misri, who's a decent Ash'ari scholar. You know, some of his works on the life of Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam Ahmad Abu Hanifa have been translated and published by our scholars. Those, they put notes on it because he had Ash'arism and sometimes he would put wrong things about, misunderstand the Aqidah of Imam Ahmad or, you know, about defend the Ash'aris. So our scholars, when they published his work, they put notes on it. But Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani not only would recommend fiqh sunnah, which I've told you is an Ash'ari scholar, he would also teach the book of Sheikh Muhammad Abdul Wahab Khalaf, who is a Maturidi scholar in Usul al-Fiqh. So Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani would teach the book of a scholar of Al-Azhar, Muhammad Abdul Wahab Khalaf, which was a Maturidi, and even in the book he says the correct Aqidah is the Maturidi Aqidah, when they discuss, the difference between the Asharis and the Maturidis regarding, the hikmah behind the rulings and others, and the role of the intellect. So the scholar, he will say the Maturidi school is the best, this and that. Sheikh Albani will still teach his book. So what I'm showing to the brothers is, just study the biography of Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin. Before saying, oh, because this scholar in this conferences, or he sat with the Deobandi scholar, so I will rule him out. Look what Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani was doing, before rushing to rulings. What he was doing, Sheikh Nasiruddin Albani was receiving Asharis and Deobandis in his house. He was in, and even I have already translated, Sheikh Abdul Mohsen Abad would go to the international conferences of the OIC when he was working for Medina University. And after he went to visit Jamia Salafia in Faisalabad, after attending in Asia the meeting of the OIC, he didn't say, oh, I won't go to the meeting of the OIC because there's scholars of all countries invited in it. And brothers who are saying a good Salafi speaker, he can't go to an international conference of Al-Azhar, he can't be part of fiqh body. Not only you're restricting his access to the layman and universities, but by going there as well, if they get honorarium for working in a fiqh council, they get salaries, they can use this amount to spread the da'wah, to strengthen masajid, to strengthen the Islamic finances of the Salafis. Lots of brothers, they have their lawyers, they have a good carriers, and they will pressurize other students not to go to a place or work in a fiqh council, because this decision has to be taken by scholars. You understand? If for them going to a place, an international conference, why you're restricting that? Not only for them reaching a good place or working for a fiqh council, it might give them a good amount of money. They can buy books with it, do research against Ash'ari Sufis, and they can invest this money in good projects. So not only by boycotting international conferences, international seminars, you are not only not letting the international ministers and international presidents know what is the mawqif of Ahl Hadith, but as well, you are depriving workers who maybe some Medina students want to go to different forums, but they're being prevented by people who have no Islamic qualifications. You understand? So this is why I advise the brothers, don't be, if some youngsters pressurize you, because I know some brothers, they say, oh, I want to go to places, but I'm pressurized not to go, because someone else from an institute will be there or someone there. Once you consult the major scholars of your country, just go. Have tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and just work on the minhaj of Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani and the major scholars of their time. Study yourself their biographies and just, move on and don't, consult the major scholars and don't, okay, if some brothers don't want you to go, you say, look, is that your opinion? I love you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not your enemy. I wish only good for you, but I will follow other scholars' opinions. So this is how we can progress towards, a good coexistence of brothers who have different point of view. Those who follow the views of Sharia Hajuri, they don't share platforms. Those who follow the views of other scholars, they go to fiqh council, they go to international conference. That's fine. That's fine. We can coexist in a society with differences of opinion. You understand? But the thing is, I'm not telling you, you're not Salafi. Now, if you tell those students who are going to fiqh councils or to international, they're not Salafis, that's where the problem arises. You understand? So my aim anyway was not to impose any view or to give. It's just to show you what the scholars have done. What the scholars had Hanafi teachers, they had Hanafi students, they were receiving Deobandi in the house, they had letters from academics around the world, they were translating books of Asharis, they were teaching books of Asharis, like Sheikh Muhammad Zahra, Sheikh Albani was teaching it, Sheikh Abu Zahra's book were translated into Urdu. So, after people can see themselves what the scholars are doing, consult themselves. There's so many, hundreds of scholars in India, Pakistan, hundreds of scholars in Sham, hundreds of scholars in Africa. People can make their own committees of scholars and work with them and ask them. You understand? But Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani, he never imposed on Sheikh Tabakh that I will only take ijazah from you if you stop teaching Asharis. Nowadays, if Sheikh Tabakh was alive, will the youngsters, those who say we know Minhaj, will they invite Sheikh Tabakh? Or they will say, oh, he teaches Asharis, he goes to this madrasa. If they were alive at the time of Hafiz ibn Kathir, will they say to Hafiz ibn Kathir, Hafiz Zahabi, or Mizi, you have to stop teaching the Subkis, or you have to stop teaching the Subkis because Subkis are Asharis, and then only I will invite you to my place? Will you pressurize Sheikh Tabakh with this type of Sheikh Hafiz ibn Kathir or this? You know, this type of thinking never existed, that you should not teach Ashari scholars, you should not teach them hadith. Subki, they used to go weekly to the lessons of Hafiz Zahabi and Hafiz ibn Kathir. You know, you can read in Istabaqat Shafi'iyah, you know, all the books are present. So when you see how these scholars, they interacted with the Shafi'i Salafi scholars, the Hanafi Salafi scholars, how they interacted with the non-Salafis, then everything will open for you, and now you can play a big, powerful role in the society. Now that you can be part of the Muslim, you can be part of a political party, you can be part of Jamia Ulama Islam, you can be part of Nadwa Committee, you can be part of Muslim Council of Britain. Now you're empowered to work and have a positive step in the society. Maybe a layman who doesn't like Salafiyah, he will see you having a positive step, and just by seeing you, he will love Salafiyah. By you working in a political party and relieving the distress, you know, having a stand for the immigrants at the border. Okay, you don't do it the wrong way. Do your stuff with good Christian and good Jewish. The Muslims make their dua separate, the Christians make their dua separate. Do it the proper way. You understand? If someone makes a mistake, does it the wrong way, you do a rally at the border with the other faith or group faith. Do it the proper way. The Muslim make their own dua, the Christian make their own dua, you know. Do it the proper way, but don't say don't do anything. For the layman, don't do any work for the ummah, because if I go to this rally or to this protest where I'm invited to speak, there will be an Ashari scholar. You understand? That's not the way forward. Now, if a politician, let's say in America, invites you, what's your view on what's going on? Now you will say, I will not go to this place because they have invited an Ashari scholar. You understand? So that's not the way forward. That's no scholar around the world work this way. Our scholars, they went to Al-Azhar and they even invite an Azhari scholar. You understand? In their conferences. And everything is documented. Everything is written down. Everything. I'm just showing you how hundreds of scholars worked around the world. And how they understood the narrations of the Salaf is they only applied in a society where boycott works. By being stricter, then the person will make tawbah. That's how boycott works. That's how Sheikh Albani and others, they have said that boycott works. Now, does it, you know, in a society where it doesn't work, you know, your boycott has no effect on the society. So you understand, that's how the scholars understood it, and they have written books about it, Sheikh Bakr Abu Zaid and many other senior scholars. So it's not principles, you know, that that's how all the scholars work since hundreds of years. And that's what I would want to tell the youth, and I will terminate this now. We have to be ready for Jum'ah. Wa sallallahu ala nabi. Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. So obviously it's the third and my last part on the minhaj of Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani, one of the greatest scholars of the last century and one of the leading scholars of hadith. MashaAllah, Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani, he was really inspirational to many brothers, and he has a great influence around the world. Himself, the Sheikh, was grown as a Hanafi scholar, and by reading the books of Sheikh Muhammad Rashid Rida Misri, I mean, in India, Pakistan, they call him Misri, but he was from Lebanon, but then he moved to Egypt, where he established his magazine Al-Manar, which became popular and created revolution around the world. Many of our scholars have mentioned the influence of Sheikh Muhammad Rashid Rida around the world, and how many scholars through his writing left shirk and bid'ah and left blind following and superstition and khurafat. So this is about Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani, one of the great scholars of the last century. But unfortunately, many of our youth nowadays who associate themselves to the Salafi movement, you know, they have some views, and obviously I'm just presenting the views of Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani, yeah, and you know, and not from my own sources, and not from any other Islamic sources. I'm presenting them from Salafi sources, from his own students, from his own websites. In my first two parts, I had presented from a book which was approved by the students of Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani, which is in English, in Urdu, a book published by Darussalam. So it's not a book, something that a Nashari is claiming. You understand? This is something that Salafis are claiming, where Sheikh al-Albani went and how he interacted with academics from the other parts. So in my previous part, I had said that Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani hosted Sheikh Muhammad Habibur Rahman Azami, because I read it somewhere and then I remembered where I read it. So I will read you this bit from his book, and then I will read you some of his fatwa, which are present on his own website, which I had already translated, and some of his statements which he wrote in magazines, and which his students, the Forum Kul al-Salafin, which was under the supervision of Sheikh Ali Hassan Halabi rahimahullah, and his students, the moderator he puts, because they had the discussions about the views of the Sunni scholars on Ta'awun al-Bir wa Taqwa, and they had an academic discussion, and they put some statements of Sheikh Ibn Baz, Sheikh Uthaymeen. And there are many other statements of Sheikh al-Albani on cooperation, which Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi put in some of his books in refutation of some. I don't want to name people, because my aim is not, because people get passionate when they hear names. So I want to keep it the most generic and beneficial, because my way has always been to advise, not destroy. And this way is the proper way among Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We advise, we don't destroy. The scholars who have good and bad. Obviously, if someone is an extreme, he's an evil person, he's harming communities, he's a wujudi, he's doing magic, you know, we can destroy. But these principles we advise, we don't destroy. It's a correct principle. Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi wrote a book about it, because people gave it a bad color. And Sheikh Adnan Urur, who Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani, the audio is on YouTube, you know, he highly praised him. You know, he said, I know him since 30 years. Sheikh Saleh Sadlan praised him, and he said, look, the people who have differences with Sheikh Adnan Urur, why they don't sit with other scholars, you understand? Why, you know, he defended Sheikh Adnan Urur. And the issue is, if a scholar makes a statement, then you know, you have to take his mujmal statement by his mufassal statement, what he means by advise, we don't destroy. And obviously when he said, I'm ready to sit with Sheikh, when some of his opponents in the late 90s opposed him, he said to some of his opponents, I don't want to name people, because people, the problem is they get really passionate by names. I just want to make a principle that if people who both claim to be upon the Sunnah, both following Salafiyah, if they have a differences and scholars are alive, instead of arguing against each other, you can easily sit with a common group of scholars. If people are sincere, I believe they can always find a way. If they don't want to sit with the common group of scholars, it means there's a problem with somewhere. There are different organizations, there's different institutes, and they have some problems for which they don't sit together. One wants his line to be told, and he wants to pressurize the other to take his line. Else, you know, the scholars are alive. Some have different views. You know, two Salafi brothers who differ, they can easily refer nowadays with technology to 20 different scholars, write their issues. That many scholars from India, Pakistan, I know, they say, we're ready. If anyone has a dispute regarding minhaj or whatever differences of opinion, we're ready to, either both of the people can write to us. Some of them, they said they can come to our place and discuss. So many of our leading scholars, they're ready to host two Salafi brothers who have differences, any issues from India, Pakistan. There's many scholars around the world in Egypt, Morocco, Lebanon, Sham, Yemen, who can be consulted on different topics in which but it's both sides present their views. It's not one side presents the view of the other. Because this is what Sheikh Ibrahim Ruhaili said, is when people attribute to someone something and when I read his statement, there's a big difference. You understand? By changing few words, or giving a wrong meaning, you can change the his complete scenario. So Sheikh Adnan Urur, his audio is on YouTube. He said that I've wrote to my opponents, and I've got witnesses, that we can go to Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani or Sheikh Abdulaziz ibn Baz. They both know me since 30 years and have no issue. You know, this is how a Salafi should be. If I translate a fatwa of a scholars on cooperation and I'm mistaken in my translation, or I said to this scholar attended a conference of the Muslim World League, if it's false, you know, I'm the first ready to correct myself. If a brother says to me, you know, this scholar, that's not his opinion, I'm the first to correct myself. You know, I'm happy to sit with any scholar at any time, any place, and have a discussion, you understand? And I'm not saying, you know, but when someone is sincere and he's presenting facts, he's not distorting them, you know, if I'm saying something which is wrong, there's no problem, you understand? So that's why that's why, you know, I'm inspired by some Salafi scholars, and Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi, I'm inspired by him as well. Though I don't agree with everything Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi and all these people all these scholars, they're all human. At the end of the day, they can all make mistakes. But he had some disputes, and he went to Sheikh Albani and he asked him about a group, can we cooperate with them? The YouTube is 14 minutes, it is on YouTube. You understand the discussion between Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani and Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi about the issue of cooperation, and then he quoted other statements of Sheikh, he wrote them down, his tapes, Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani. So now some people, they take some general statement of Sheikh Albani and they say, oh, he didn't allow cooperation, but you know, what they are presenting is one scenario. Other scenarios, there are clear audios which are present on the website. He says you can cooperate with, and I will read it, you can cooperate with an Ash'ari in the field of dawah. So such cooperation, like if I have to go in a conference and they make me sign a paper saying, you know, Ash'aris are right or Sufis are right, and you shouldn't, such cooperation, this is the cooperation which Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani criticized. Such type of cooperation in which either you have to compromise your principles, you have to have hizbiyah, or you have to, you know, say each other, we don't criticize each other. But as for cooperating in good manners, I have already shown to you that Sheikh volunteered, and there's a link, if you download the book, you can download the book Fiqh al-Sirah in English online of Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali, and he says that Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin volunteered to do takhrij of my book and you know, hadith. And Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali was you know, there's no, we're not discussing, you understand, whether he was he didn't make a mistake, what is the hukum on him. We're just saying he was an Ash'ari scholar. And you know, I'm not speaking of any political group, you know, because the issue is I'm speaking in a generic manner, just about Ash'ari scholar, because some people have an issue, or this scholar he's speaking against my favorite country. Let's suppose there's an Ash'ari scholar and he's speaking not against your favorite country, rather your favorite country is inviting such Ash'ari scholars. You know, like some Mufti of Al-Azhar, or there's a Mufti in India who is Ash'ari, and he's okay with your country. So because some people, they get sensitive about country, some they get sensitive about some scholars. But let's say he's an Ash'ari, because I want to keep things generic, you understand? Let's say he's an Ash'ari scholar from Malaysia, from Africa, and he's okay with your favorite countries or your prince or your president, you understand? I don't want to make such cases, people, you know, some is just, you know, it triggers them if they hear some names. You understand? I'm just speaking as an Ash'ari scholar like Nawawi ibn Hajar, or like Sayyid Sabiq, people will say, let's say Muhammad Abu Zahra, or some others, Mufti of Iraq, Lebanon, who are not part of any political groups. And they're invited by your favorite countries or your favorite princes. Because let's say someone like this and they praise your favorite prince. So you have no issue with them. They're just Ash'aris, you understand? Let's say the Mufti of Al-Aqsa, he's just, you know, he's just an Ash'ari scholar. And he's not speaking against your prince, he's not speaking against your, you know, let's make a generic statement like this. Because I want to keep it the most generic possible, you understand? He's an Ash'ari scholar from Al-Azhar. He has mistakes in Aqidah like Nawawi, Ibn Hajar, Suyuti, and Ibn Hajar, Nawawi, you know, they had Sufism as well. You know, Hafiz Ibn Hajar, he summarized the book Bahjatul Asrar of Shatnufi, which Ibn Rajab and others said contain atrocities, things only, but he summarized it like Hafiz Sakhawi brought in Maqasid Hasana. So they don't only have Ta'wil, they have other mistakes. Suyuti has Sufism as well. He doesn't only have Ash'arism. You understand? He doesn't only have Ta'wil. And Nawawi as well, like many late Shafi'i scholars, he would do some forms of tawassul, like asking the Prophet to make dua for you. That's written in his book on fiqh. You understand? So many of the late scholars, they had other mistakes as Asharis. So let's just speak, he's an Ashari scholar like Ibn Hajar or Badruddin Aini. And so I've already presented to you that Sheikh Albani did takhrij of Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali's book, okay? He's an Ashari scholar. The other books that Sheikh Mahmoud Taha and Sheikh other scholars, Yusuf Qardawi, let's say it's not Yusuf Qardawi, they were asking Sheikh Albani about hadith and he would, answer them and reply them and have meetings in conferences. So now, what I presented to you, Sheikh Albani took ijazah from a scholar who was also the teacher of Sheikh Abu Huda and other Ashari scholars. So Sheikh Albani never met such conditions, with some of our youngsters are making conditions. That if you don't boycott this institute or that masjid or that organization, then we won't invite you. It's either us or them, or it's either you to my time or you outside of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani, he would criticize someone, some groups and organization, and he would point out their mistakes. But he would never say, that you can't cooperate with the Ashari, you understand? He would, or such cooperation in which, you can't criticize Asharism. Now some of the youngsters, they say if you share a platform or a fiqh council with an Ashari, it means you can't refute it, which is totally false, because the Hanbali scholars, like I told you, Hafiz Zahabi, you can read what Subki says about him, our teachers, he was too harsh against Asharis, this, and he used to go to his weekly dars. Now he's coming to your dars, it doesn't mean you can't refute him. You understand? The Hanbali scholars who in the Majalis al-Qada of the state and other places, what they were teaching in Ashari Madrasa, it didn't stop Hafiz Mizi to criticize Asharism and their views. You understand? When Ibn Taymiyyah learned from Ashari or Maturidi teachers, once he was qualified as a mufti, he was not a layman. When he went to learn from them some of the sciences, and Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, he knew Hanafi fiqh more than some Hanafi scholars. That's why on one topic, Ibn Abidin Hanafi says, on this issue, because there's nothing in the Hanafi books, but Ibn Taymiyyah attributes it to the Hanafis. So this is the mazhab of Hanafis, because Ibn Taymiyyah must know some sources about it. So Ibn Taymiyyah only knew the Maliki fiqh better than the Malikis, or the Shafi'i fiqh better than the Shafi'is, or the Hanafi fiqh better than the Hanafis, because he learned from some shuyukh. And Sheikh Abdullah Ghuniman said it, I didn't say it, and it's proven in all the biographies that Sheikh... So he sat with them to acknowledge, he's a scholar, he's not a layman. You understand? So a scholar can interact. If a scholar in America or in India, he's qualified to sit in a fiqh forum, why are you forbidding his progress and him helping the society? The problem is many of the youngsters, they don't have the academical level to be invited to Al-Azhar. So if you don't have the academical level to be invited by the King of Morocco, by the King of Malaysia, it doesn't mean now you have to stop people who have the academics to have an influence in the society to come on CNN or on BBC. You understand? So this is why I'm telling the youngsters, don't stop the progress of Salafi academics going on national forums and speaking and standing with, for justice and oppression. Don't stop the Salafi academics becoming leaders in America and for the struggle like Malcolm X, or in India, Pakistan against Modi, the Zulm and what his laws he's making against the Muslims. Don't tell the scholars in India. And in India, you don't have youngsters in their 20s sitting on a panel saying, can we cooperate, can we not cooperate? It's the major scholars of a country who have 30, 40 years. And these major scholars who are in their 60s, they have gathered, some of them studied in India or some in Saudi Arabia. They have met hundreds of major scholars of our times. They haven't just met one scholar or two, like some youngsters, sometimes they just meet one scholar from Yemen, one scholar from Jordan, one from Saudi Arabia. They have studied under hundreds of scholars from India, Pakistan. Sheikh Ubaidullah Rahmani, they have seen him in the same conference with Sheikh Abul Hassan Ali Nadvi. They have seen even Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani told among the 5 major scholars, they have seen Hafiz Gundalvi doing this. They have seen, so these scholars, they have seen they have interacted with scholarship around the world. So when you consult them about going to a platform, going to Al-Azhar conference, they will tell you that that's what my grandfather was a muhaddith, that's what he used to do. So this is why, instead of rushing to a group of youngsters who have only limited knowledge about how the scholars work and how they understand the issues of cooperation, it's better to go to the scholars who are in their 60s, 70s. like Sheikh Abdul Mohsin Abbad. If I'm mistaken, I will stand corrected, but I read in the biography of Sheikh Ismail Salafi that he went to Jamia Salafia in Faisalabad after he went to an international conference of the OIC. So the major scholars, they used to go to the conferences of the OIC. They used to go to the conferences of the Muslim World League. And it's on their own forum. You can see fatwa of Sheikh Luhaydan signed with Sheikh Mustafa Zarqa, and the fatwa of Sheikh Ibn Baz, Ibn Uthaymin signed with the Mufti of Al-Azhar, or signed with the Tahir Ibn Ashur. It's all on their websites in Arabic and in English. You understand? It's not something it's in the book of Maulana Maududi, or it's in the book of Sheikh Yusuf Qardawi. This is on the Muslim World League website. I'm only putting this to your attention. So when you judge Ahl Hadith scholar to be deviated, then you have to apply the same standard. You understand? If you say a Palestinian scholar or an American scholar is misguided for working on the same panel as an Ashari in a fiqh council or in an institute, then you have to first apply the same principle on the Saudis. You understand? That's all I want. After, if you believe the Saudis are misguided, the American is misguided, the Palestinian is misguided, the Indo-Pak is misguided, then it's up to you. You understand? I have no issue. You understand? If you follow the rules of Mahmud Haddad, you want to burn the books of Imam Nawawi, and you want to burn the books of Hafiz Ibn Hajar, that's your views. As long as you apply the same rules to everyone, I don't have any issue. You understand? But if you say an Indian scholar, we don't invite him, we cancel him out, we write him off because he goes to conference with Ashari scholars, and then other scholars are doing the same, and people show you the pictures, people give you the link to the website, people show you YouTube videos of different people. After you can give your own explanation to a jihad, people can see it. You understand? It's not something hidden. There's videos, pictures. So now I will just carry on from this, because last time I mentioned Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani received in his house Sheikh Habibur Rahman A'dami, and this is written in the book of Sheikh Ali Hassan Halabi. His book entitled, I have it in front of me, the PDF, Rad Ilmi ala Habibur Rahman A'dami. You understand? And it is on page, you can download it, the PDF. Because someone from India calling himself Arshad Salafi, who wrote a book against Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani. And when Sheikh Ali Hassan Halabi said, we asked people of India, they said, oh, we don't know any Arshad Salafi, and it might be Habibur Rahman A'dami, Hanafi Deobandi scholar. Maybe he's about Ilmul Hadith, scholar of Hadith refuting or not, it's no problem. Bayhaqi would refute Hanafi scholar Tahawi and others, there's no problem. Ibn Hajar would refute on Ilmul Hadith, Aini will refute him, and they will go after, have ilmi niqash debates, there's no problem. Hanafi and Shafi scholars, they always debated themselves. So Ahl Hadith and Ahnaf debating on Ilmul Hadith, and that's basically, so no problem. But the point is that, when they asked the Indian scholar, who is this Arshad Salafi, they said it might be Sheikh Habibur Rahman A'dami. So after Sheikh Ali Hassan Halabi said, وَوَصَلَ الْأَعْذَمِ دِمَشْقَ, so Al-Azami came to Dimashq, وَنَزَلَ دَيْفًا عَلَى مَنْ عَلَى الْأَلْبَانِ. So Habibur Rahman A'dami, he wrote a book by another name, Sheikh Habibur Rahman A'dami, who was one of the leading scholars of the Deobandi school of thought. He wrote a book against Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani by another name, but then وَوَصَلَ عَثَمِ دِمَشْقَ وَنَزَلَ دَيْفًا عَلَى مَنْ عَلَى الْأَلْبَانِ بَلْ مَكَثَ عِنْدَهُ بِذَاتَ أَيَّامٍ بِلْيَالِهِنَّ. So Al-Azami, he said, he remained in Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani's house for many nights. This is Sheikh Ali Hassan Halabi writing this. And he said they had some this discussion, I don't want to read many. And he said because they had some discussion on fiqh issues and ilm al-hadith, so they had this in their mind that, that people are told him that maybe he's the one who wrote the book against Sheikh Albani by another name. But he said that we had this in our mind,
that the host of Sheikh Albani actually wrote a book against him, his guest. But he said, but there were many issues we didn't want to raise these issues. Many of them, of the reason, لكن أسبابا كانت تمنع ذلك منها حق للضيافة, that because of he was our guest, we didn't want to start a niqash with him, that why are you the one who wrote a book against Sheikh Albani. كبر السن وعلامات الضعف, so, and he was older and he was weak, so we didn't want to enter a niqash with him. وعدم وجود دليل مؤكد لما هو مذنون, and there was no clear evidence that he was actually the author of the book against Sheikh Albani. وحسن الظن به, and we had good opinion of him. So after, after he left the book of Sheikh Albani, and then they replied this book, Rad Ilmi ala Habibur Rahman A'zami. So it's a book on Ilm al-Hadith, on fiqh. Like I told you, the Shafis, Hanafis, they always had this debate. There's nothing wrong with debating. Hafiz Turkmani, he refuted the book Imam al-Bayhaqi. And in our recent time, one of the hadith scholars, Allama Faidur Rahman Sawri, he refuted Johar al-Naqi of Allama Turkmani. So having fiqh discussion on ilm al-hadith or fiqh and having passionate debates is no problem. So but what my point of view is, Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani received a Hanafi scholar as a guest in his house. Now guess if it was a scholar from India, Pakistan, the Ghulat Tajri would say straight away, drop this scholar. He's eating, he's drinking with a Hanafi scholar, he's having a guest in his house, Hanafi Deobandi scholars, and you can read their books. They're mainly, nowadays some of them after studying Medina starting to be Atharis. But in India, Pakistan, they teach, it is written Muhannad al-Mufannad, that normally they're all Ashari Maturidi, and they teach the Aqidah Maturidi. So Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani, he hosted him as a scholar in his house. Now, if I was to host a Deobandi scholar in my house and have some discussion of fiqh, I've written off. He doesn't know Minhaj, he doesn't know Salafiyah, he's having an Ashari scholar in his house. If one of our elders was to do this, straight away he will be dropped and people will say he doesn't know Salafiyah, he doesn't read Barbahari. So I'm just showing you what Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani did. What he did, he did takhrij of the books of Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali. And I'm not saying Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali's books shouldn't be refuted or his Asharism shouldn't be refuted. I'm just showing you what Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Albani has done. And Sheikh Ali Hassan Halabi, he also published a book which is being translated in Urdu by our team, Hafiz Shahid Mahmood. I guess he published a book. He wrote a book against Sheikh Ahmad Ghumari, because Sheikh Ahmad Ghumari, he wrote a book against Sheikh Albani on the issue of tawassul and raising the graves and building mausoleum. So not only he wrote a book against Ghumari, but he also Hafiz Ahmad ibn Siddiq Ghumari, but he also published a book of Ahmad ibn Siddiq al-Ghumari against Al-Albani. And this book, we have it. I gave it to Hafiz Abdul Manan Nurpuri as a gift when I visited him. And now Hafiz Shah took it from him to translate it, and it is being translated in Urdu. So we are going to publish a book of Ahmad ibn Siddiq al-Ghumari, you understand, who is in no, and Sheikh Ali Hassan Halabi put notes on it, and it is against Zahid al-Kawthari. He said Zahid al-Kawthari, though Ghumari was a student of Allama al-Kawthari, but he refuted him, and he said, you're going over against the Shafis, you're disrespecting the Shafi scholars, Hafiz ibn Hajar, and you're disrespecting some of the Aslaf, and you're contradicting your own rules of Hadith whenever to suit your madhab and this and that. So Ali Hassan Halabi published the book of Hafiz Ahmad al-Ghumari. So this is what I'm saying to you. Now, Salafi, Ali Hadith, you can publish a good book of an Ashari scholars. You can publish the book, good book of Sheikh Muhammad Abu Zahras. Many of our scholars have translated his books on fiqh, on the biography of Imam Ahmad, the biography of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. They have added notes because sometimes he makes mistakes in Aqidah. So you can publish this one. I'm covering the use. You can do it. If Sheikh Albani did it, Sheikh Ali Hassan Halabi did it, you can do it. Now let's move forward. This is the next what Sheikh Albani did. So Sheikh Albani hosted a Deobandi scholar in his house. The next one, I'm just going to read the translation. I've already given you the Arabic code this morning, and the link, it is on Kul al-Salafin. It's not in the books of Maulana Maududi, it's not in the books of Yusuf Qaradawi, this is the books on the forums run by Sheikh Ali Hassan Halabi. You understand? So he won't attribute something falsely to Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani. And they were having a discussion on the forum Kull al-Salafin about ta'awun ala al-bir wa taqwa. And the moderator of the forum, he's the one who quoted that Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani said in the magazine Furqan, number 77, page 82, about the rule of Sheikh Hassan Al-Banna. We do not, about his rules, we gather upon what we agree and we excuse each other on what we differ. Okay? So Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani said in the magazine Furqan, which was on the Jami'atul Ras, number 77, page 22, we do not doubt that the first part of the sentence is correct, meaning we gather upon what we agree. And it is we help on what we agree. The first sentence is directly derived from his speech, help upon bir wa taqwa, wa ta'awunu ala al-birri wa taqwa. As for the second sentence, we excuse each other, it is necessary to restrict it, and until what? When we advise each other and we say, to the one who erred, you erred, and the evidence is such and such, and we see him not convinced, and we see him sincere, so we leave his case. And we cooperate with him on what we agree. If we see him turning away out of pride, then his sentence is not correct, and we do not excuse him in the matters in which we differ. You understand? So he said the first sentence is right. We cooperate in any matter on which we agree and which benefit the ummah. So if there's a conference in Al-Azhar and they're doing stuff against, let's say, those who insult the Sahaba, or they're doing something against liberalism, secularism, or they're doing a conference in Pakistan, you're a scholar academic, they invite you, our scholars, they go to Al-Azhar. The Saudi scholars, they go, the Mufti of Mauritania, the Mufti this, they go, and you give your position. So you go there and you're not supporting them in their mistakes, you understand? And Sheikh Ibn Baz in his Fatawa, he said the same. When he was quoting the rule of Sheikh Hassan al-Banna rahimahullah, he said, yes, it is obligatory to help in issues in which we agree in supporting the truth and the call to it, a warning against what Allah and His Messenger have warned. So it is obligatory to help in issues in which we agree. As for excusing each other in order we differ, it is not absolute. Rather, there is distinction. What is among the matters of ijtihad which evidence is not evident, it is obligatory not to object. Okay, if it's a matter when there is valid ijtihad, both of a hadith. As for what opposes the book of Sunnah, it is obligatory to object to the one who opposes the clear text with wisdom, mawidha hasana, and jidal with good manners, acting upon his speech. So you cooperate with them in anything which is bir wa taqwa, but you don't cooperate with... Now, if they call you in a conference to say Asharism is right, Tawil is right, or they call you in a conference saying you can insult the Sahaba, no, I'm not going to this conference. Or if, but if they call you in conferences that, that the topic is, the danger of Wahdatul Wujud, or the danger of Wahdatul Adyan, the danger of Qadianism, the danger of Khomeini, then you can go. You understand? And the Ashari Mufti coming, he's not stopping you from doing your good action and presenting your good views. Our scholars, like I told you, since 100 years, they used to go to the conference Darul Nadwa, and all the Hanafi scholars, the Ubandi scholars were invited as well. Sheikh Abdul Jabbar Ghazawi, Sheikh Abdul Jabbar Umar Puri, the grandfather of Sheikh Abdul Ghaffar Hassan. So anything which the Salafi scholars in India, Pakistan, the biggest institution, Jamia Salafia Banaras, when they've done their international conference on Ibn Taymiyyah, they've invited the scholars of Aligarh and the scholars of Nadwa. You understand? There's pictures of Sheikh Ubaidullah Mubarak Puri, Sheikh Mukhtar Nadwi sitting next to Sheikh Abul Hassan Nadwi, and the Saudi scholars as well. So there's picture about it. Number two, Sheikh Dawood Ghaznavi Ismail Salfi Atalabujani, when they invited in Lahore, when Jamia Salafia was in Lahore at the time, before it was built properly in Faisalabad, they invited Sheikh Abul Hassan Nadwi and gave him a trophy. You understand? So no one had an issue with inviting scholars of other schools of thoughts. And they have invited our scholars in their conferences. They have invited, like I've told you, in India they've done a conference and it is published by Nu'mani Kutub Khana. Sheikh Mukhtar Nadwi, he invited the head of the Jamaat Islami, he invited the head of the Deobandi scholars, he invited Taj Uruj Qadri, so he invited, and because all these Hanafi scholars, they agreed with Ahl Hadith on triple talaq being counted as one in one sitting. So you're not helping them on a bad manner. You're not helping them to support Asharism or to support Sufism, you understand? You inviting them to speak on something, so the layman, they see the other scholars agree on this issue, so the layman, they don't need to do halala, you understand? And likewise, our scholars invited others in books in Pakistan are published from seminaries in which they invited the son of Maulana Safra Safdar Khan and other Deobandi scholars, and it is commonly practiced that they invite other scholars. Sheikh Abu Ghuda went to the maktab of Sheikh Muhibbullah Shah Rashidi and Sheikh Taqi Usmani and this and that, and many of our scholars, they gave ijazah to Sheikh Abu Ghuda al-Hanafi, though they advised him, about Zahid al-Kawsari and his attacks on the Salaf. So all these facts are documented and written down on books, and the scholars, they say that Sheikh Abdul Ghaffar Hasan said that Mufti Usmani, the father of Taqi Usmani, would come to his house. Yusuf Binori would come in my house when I was in Medina. And though he left Jamaat Islami, he went to England. Sheikh Abdul Ghaffar Hasan, he visited the center in Leicester, Maulana Khurshid Ahmad Islamic Foundation. He visited his students, which he taught while he was teacher in Jamaat Islami. So our scholars, they always had meetings, discussions, and they always quote the good of each other. Hafiz al-Din Yusuf quote the Maulana Maududi when he leaves the view of the Ahnaf and he criticized them on the issue of Khulla. So there's no problem quoting. Many of the Salafi scholars which I have seen nowadays, they say there's no problem quoting any good of any scholar. Sheikh Shamsuddin Afghani, he quotes the good of Safraz Khan Safdar against Brailvis, he quotes the statements of Maulana Maududi against grave worship. There's no problem. And not only quoting the good, there's hundreds years of our magazines present of Ahl Hadith scholars. So in our magazines, you can see sometimes there's articles of the Deobandi scholars or the other scholars. And some of our scholars, they've wrote articles in the other schools of thought magazines. You understand? When they wrote a good article, the other people, they say, oh, can I publish it? It's a good article. It's something we agree on. Maulana Maududi, we don't agree with him. So Hafiz Saladin Yusuf, he got Sheikh Yusuf Binori to introduce his book. Sheikh Dawood Arshad, he got his book against Ja al-Haq. He got the Deobandi scholars to introduce his book. And the Deobandi scholar, he also said he only agrees with me on the parts against Bid'at, but he doesn't on the issue of triple talaq and fiqh. He is paband of the he only agrees in my book on the issues of shirk and bid'ah. He only approved this bit. He doesn't approve the bit of the Hanafi fiqh. He's paband of Hanafi fiqh. So this is what I'm saying. If you look 100 years of how the scholars behaved, Sheikh Muallimi, when he was in India, he done takhrij of books with the Nadwi scholars and the Musnad Abi Awana. So how different Sheikh Taqiyuddin Hilali, he worked in Nadwa, in the magazine of Nadwa, which was run by Sheikh Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi. He wrote articles in the magazines of other groups, Al-Ikhwan Sheikh Taqiyuddin Hilali. So this type of cooperation, you're not supporting their mistakes, you understand? This type of cooperation, no one, Sheikh Albani did not forbid it. You understand? If people bring generic statements, you have to look at the context. Is such statements in which there is Hizbiyah, in which there is such rules in which we excuse each other, you understand? Or in which we don't speak against each other, we're all good. This is what Sheikh Albani said, this is false. You should always refute the one who makes a mistake. And by the way, the rules, we agree upon what, we gather upon what we agree, we excuse on each other. I read in a book, it's actually Sheikh Rashid Rida who was the first to say it. And Sheikh Hassan al-Banna took it from him, but I need further research on it, but I have seen one Saudi scholar who said it's actually Sheikh Rashid Rida who said it. And their context was a context of decolonization, in which they needed to waken up all the people around them. The Magazine al-Mana brought revolution in the thinking of the Muslim scholars. And that's why Sheikh Nasruddin al-Albani, Sheikh Ahmad Shakir, they became Salafi. They used to be Hanafi, Muqallid. They became Salafi by reading Al-Manar, by Sheikh Rashid Rida, interacting with him. So, this rule, the Salafi scholars, they only rejected the first bit of it. And even Sheikh Ibn Uthaymin, he said in the magazine Sahwa Islamiyah, they're saying we gather on what we agree the truth. This is truth. As for the saying, we excuse each other on what we differ, that context distinction, what is permissible in ijtihad we excuse, and the other, it is not permissible to differ has because of khilaf. When ijtihad is not permissible, we do not excuse in what we differ, and we must submit to the truth. So the first sentence is correct, and the second, there is distinction. So these three statements, because people now they consider these three scholars as the main heads of the scholars. For Ahli Hadith scholars, this is not true, by the way. Many Ahli Hadith scholars I have seen, they said they consider Hafiz Muhammad Gondelvi and Hafiz Abdullah Ropri more knowledgeable than Sheikh Ibn Baz. Not one, many I have seen. But for me, it's not true that these three scholars were the major, but mostly the Westerners, because they don't go to study in India, Pakistan, or even their holidays, they don't go. You know, they go to Turkey or they go other places. They don't go to India, Pakistan to have a reading. So, some Hanafi scholars, some scholars, Sham scholars, Sheikh Abdullah Ubay, they go to India, Pakistan. But our youngsters, unfortunately, third generations, many of the Mirpuri, they can't even speak Urdu. I mean, it's really sad, but... So what I was going to say is that Arab scholars, they go to India, Pakistan since 100 years. But now there is the next generation, because they have been brainwashed to think that the Salafi is only one country. The Salafi of Yemen, of Sham, it's unthinkable the use how they, in Egypt, how much scholarship there is. Many of the tahqiq, the books, you know, that scholars have written in India, Pakistan, you can rarely find such a muhaddith in Saudi Arabia. There are quite few, but I don't want to give their names, because after people get excited when they hear the names of Sheikh Tarafi or Sheikh Abdurrahman ibn Sa'd or others, you know, they get a little bit. So I'm just telling you, there's only few scholars of hadith who can do the same stuff, you know, which other scholars can do. You know, refuting the book Johar al-Naqi of Sheikh Turkmani. Scholars in India, Pakistan can do it, you understand, to refute such books. Refuting the books Faisal Bari of Anwar Shah Kashmiri, you know, many of the scholars, they can't even understand the mantiqi istilahat used by these scholars, and because they use mantiq in their istidlal in fiqh. A scholar who hasn't studied mantiq, he can't even understand what Anwar Shah, Maulana Anwar Shah Kashmiri means, you understand, by his terminology. So because our scholars, they studied mantiq, so they can understand it. So I'm going out of the topic now. I'm just stating you the three main scholars, because if I tell you Hafiz Gondelvi, he was member of the Muslim League, he cooperated, the people will say, who's Hafiz Muhammad Gondelvi? If I tell you, you know, Hafiz Ropuri's nephew was member of Muslim, he got elected, people will say, who's Abdullah Ropuri? And it's sad, but that's a reality. So I'm just giving you the three scholars, and it is quoted on the forum Kullal Salafin, which was run by Ali Hassan Halabi. Now we move on. The next stuff is, this one is on the website of Sheikh Albani, you understand, alalbani.net. The questioner asks him, is it allowed to cooperate with the man of Ashari Aqidah in the way calling to Allah, meaning in the field of da'wah, with the justification that the difference in Aqidah does not lead to vice, rather in cooperating with him could lead, rather not cooperating with him could lead to splitting the efforts of the Muslim. So this is the question in Arabic. السائل هل يجوز تعاون مع رجل أشعري العقيدة في مجال الدعوة إلى الله بحجة هذا خلاف العقيدة لا يترتب عليه مفاسد. So, you know, this is the question in Arabic, and Sheikh Albani says, it's on his website, the audio is present. If the cooperating with, the translation is mine, but the Arabic is on the website. If the cooperating with the likes of the man does not lead to cooperating with him in being negligent with his aqidah, then this is from what is allowed without doubt. You understand? إذا كان تعاون مع مثل هذا الرجل لا يؤدي بتعاون معه فذلك مما يجوز بلا شك, meaning there's not even a doubt in it. Sheikh Albani never doubted that cooperating in an Ashari in such a field with him, and if cooperating with him does not make you being negligent with his aqidah, then this is from what is allowed without doubt. Rather, I believe that the moment of strong iman, that is his religious benefit to cooperate with other Muslims who have deviated from the Aqidah Salafiyah. due to the reason from the old or recent reasons. What is more priority regarding the Salafi movement is to cooperate with those people, because he will find the appropriate opportunity to give him the da'wah salafiyah. So this is Sheikh Albani. The link I already given it. It's on my website. There's a link to play the audio and there's the Arabic text. Okay, this one, Sheikh Albani done takhrij of Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali's book Fiqh Sirah. I've already said it. You can check it. Okay, the book Sheikh Mukhtar Ahmad Nadwi, head of Jamiat al-Hadith in 1973, on the issue of the triple talaq, he invited Mufti Atiqur Rahman, president of Majlis Mushawarat, Muslim Majlis. He invited Sayyid Ahmad Akbar Abadi, editor of Monthly Burhan. He invited Sayyid Ahmad Uruj Qatari, editor of Zindagi Dampur. He invited, Mukhtar Ahmad Nadwi was invited. Sayyid Hamid Ali, secretary of Jamaat Islami, was invited. Sheikh Mahfuzur Rahman Qasimi, teacher of Madrasa Bayatul Ulum Aligaon. Shams Pirzada, head of Jamaat Islami, Maharashtra. So at the end, all of these maqalat have been published under the book, and the maqala of Pir Karim Shah Azhari was added to it. And then there's all the fatwa of the Muslim World League, in which the Saudi scholars signed it with the Mufti Al-Azhar and other scholars. There's a fatwa against Freemasonry. It's on the website of the Muslim World League. So who signed it? Abdulaziz ibn Baz, Mahmoud Al-Sawaf, Saleh Husaymin, Sheikh Abdullah Suhail, Muhammad Rashid Qabbani, Mustafa Zarqa, Abu Bakr Gumi, who was a Salafi scholar. So this is one example of fatwa. There's many other fatwa. There's another fatwa which was signed regarding some issues. The link of it is on Majlis Aluka. It is on it. And it is signed by Abdulaziz ibn Baz, and it is signed by other scholars as well, the Mufti Al-Azhar and others. So all these, it is present in the Majalla Jamia Islamia, volume 25, this fatwa. His advice to the Tunisian president. So this letter was signed as well by the Mufti of Al-Azhar. They wrote a common letter to the Tunisian president, Habib Bourguiba, at the time. And, the other muftis, they signed it as well. So I've given all the links. It is present in the Majalla Jamis. So all this stuff is present on Salafi websites and on the forum Kullal Salafin, and the statements of Ibn Taymiyyah. Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi, he has written as well. He brought not only statements of Sheikh Albani, and by the way, Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi, he wrote a book, Siraj al-Wahaj, which was signed by Sheikh Ibn Uthaymin, Sheikh Ibn Jibrin, and the Mufti Abdulaziz Ali Sheikh. The Mufti, he only said I had some instances on which there was mulahadat, and he advised them to change some issues on Khabar Ahad and others. But on this point, Sheikh Abdulaziz Ali Sheikh didn't criticize this point. One of the points in Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi's book is we can cooperate with other groups in anything good. And Sheikh Ibn Jibrin, Sheikh Muhammad Saleh Husaymin introduced the book saying it's an excellent book with Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi. So when some other people tried to bully him, he didn't accept bullying, you understand? He said, my book has been introduced by Sheikh Ibn Jibrin, by Sheikh Ibn Uthaymin. I don't need to take a diktat from other scholars. This is what Sheikh Adnan Urur said the same. When people objected to his rule, we advised we don't destroy, he said we can go to Sheikh Albani, Sheikh Ibn Baz, to his opponents, but they refused. And Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi, he went to Sheikh Albani, and the 14 minutes audio is present. So, these issues, it is raised by Salafi scholars that you can cooperate, and it is present in Kulla Salafin, and they have quoted many scholars, like Hafiz ibn Qayyim. They said in his book, Zad al-Mad about the Treaty Hudaybiyah, that for polytheists, the people of innovation, fujur, transgressor, and injust, when they seek a matter in which the sanctity, a hurma among the hurumat of Allah, they should be replied to, they should be given to it, and they should be held. Meaning, if the matter, whether it is people of mushrik, people of bid'ah, people of fujur, the transgressors, the unjust, if they seek a matter in which there is a sanctity and the hurma among the hurumat of Allah, they should be replied to, they should be given help. And this is what Ibn Taymiyyah was doing. Ibn Taymiyyah was advising, he was not destroying. He had the chance to punish his opponents, But he was advised them, and he said, if I stop them teaching, how will the people benefit from them? You know, so he didn't want the Shafi'i scholars to be punished when he had the chance to punish them, those who oppressed him. But he said the people are benefiting from them. So he was advising, not destroying. So the rule of Sheikh Adnan Ali Urur was a Salafi principle, you understand? He didn't invent it. This principle always existed. The scholars in their time, they advised their Asharis. They didn't destroy them. They advised them whenever they had a problem. Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah said, I will help him. You know, the Makhluf guy, Maliki Qadhi, he said, I will help him in anything good despite what they have done to me. Qadhi Adrai and others, you know, the ruler said they should go on a donkey and they should shave their beard, and he interceded. The brother of Azrai went to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. So the scholar who gave a fatwa against Ibn Taymiyyah to be jailed, when the Qadhi, the ruler, went against him, his brother went and Ibn Taymiyyah interceded. He said, because he's a scholar, you know, he was not even doing it to his enemies. So he was not destroying them, he was advising them. And the impact it had on them, you can see yourself. An Ashari who doesn't know the Salafi Aqidah, no, you're going to intercede for him. No, you're going to help him in a good manner. Obviously, when you're going to go to his janazah, when he dies, or when you tell his children, whatever you need, I am here for you. Your father has died, and his father oppressed Ibn Taymiyyah. And his children, they will say, no, if you go to the janazah of other schools of thought, if whatever differences you have with them, you understand? If they're oppressed by Modi, we stand with them, their children will learn the Salafi Aqidah. And you know, our scholar, the son of Maulana Sarfaraz Khan Safdar, he wrote that we had excellent relations with Maulana Ismail Salafi and Allama Ihsan Ilai Zahir in Gujranwala. We would visit, we would talk to each other, we would discuss. And you know, one of the son of Ismail Salafi was a doctor. He was our familial doctor. So despite writing books against each other, they will meet, you know, it doesn't stop them by meeting, discussing, and having respect of each other. And even Sheikh Irshadullah Kathari, who wrote books on Fatih Khalful Imam, against Maulana Sarfaraz Sadr and other issues, when he passed away, he wrote condolence, and he said, I wanted to go to his janazah, and he wrote a letter to his son Maulana Zahid Rashidi that I wanted to go to janazah, but I was ill, I couldn't go. So, you know, differences in Aqidah and Asharism, it did not prevent our scholars. When the leaders of the Deobandis passed away, Sheikh Ismail Salafi and others, they always wrote obituaries and word of praise, despite differing with their Aqidah. You understand? Going to the janazah, writing their articles in the magazine. You know, if they write a good article agreeing with us on a topic, you can publish it. What's wrong with it? You can quote the people, and this is what Shaykh Abul Hasan Maghribi said. There's no issue with quoting the good statements and publishing good books of others. Like I told you, Sheikh Ali Hassan Halabi, he published the book of Sheikh Hafiz Ahmad Siddiq Khumari against Allama Kawthari. At the same time, he wrote a book against Hafiz Ahmad Khumari for his refutation against Sheikh Albani. So one scholar, he can have a good work which you can publish. At the same time, he can have a bad work which you refute. So this one was, you know, it's never existed such stuff that totally cancelling a scholar. You know, if Subki has a good book on Usul al-Fiqh, people are publishing them in Saudi Arabia, scholars, and writing notes on Barakat of Juwani without agreeing his Aqidah. Tafsir Jalal and Baydawi are being studied, you understand? Salafi scholars even are writing translating in Urdu, writing the Taliqa Salafi on it. So this is what I'm saying to you, this type of thinking, that a scholar makes a mistake, a scholar who is good and bad. I'm not speaking to someone who's totally mulhid, someone who's totally gone off, you understand? But a scholar who is good and bad is Ashari. I have told you how Sheikh Albani interacted with them. The leading scholars, Mahmud Tahan, he would write to them, he would do tahqiq for them. Sheikh Maulana Azami, Mustafa Azami, when he asked Sheikh Albani to check his takhrij of Sahih ibn Khuzaymah, Sheikh Albani did. And the name of, and nowadays the Ghulat brothers, Mustafa Azami, he was a bad minhaj, because Mustafa Azami, he criticized Sheikh Muqbil's. When Sheikh Muqbil was doing his maqala, his PhD or his thesis, the scholar from Riyadh who was criticizing Sheikh Muqbil's teaching, it was Sheikh Mustafa Azami. And he said, what you work on Daraqutni, there's nothing new in it, you're just quoting scholars. And Sheikh Muqbil was replying that no, that's what Ibn Hajar, he's done the same. He just quoted scholars before him. That's what ilm is. He's just quoting scholars. He said, but you didn't bring anything new. So Mustafa Azami, obviously, he was there to check the maqala. So, the ghula, the quote that Sheikh Muqbil said, Allahu Alam, because they haven't shown the audio. They're just saying Sheikh Muqbil said his minhaj is not good, So whatever it is, Sheikh Mustafa Azami, if nowadays the standards people have set up, because this one goes to conference, to further schools of thought he's written of, Sheikh Mustafa Azami, he would sit with all scholars, Deobandi or Sheikh Abu Khudda. So Mustafa Azami, for you, if Mustafa Azami was alive today and he asks you, the young brothers, YouTubers, to do takhrij of his book, check his takhrij, would you do it? That's all I'm asking you. Whatever Sheikh Albani has done, an Ash'ari scholars ask him to do takhrij of his book of Fiqh Sirah, would you do it? An Ash'ari scholar in London, he said, look, because I don't know hadith, I know fiqh, but because you are graduate of hadith, I'm pay you, can you check my book of hadith for me? Would you do it or not? Okay, if you don't want to do it because, you like Sheikh Yahya Hajuri, no problem, I respect Sheikh Yahya Hajuri's knowledge. You don't want to do it, but if the Salafi scholar who wants to do it, he said, look, Sheikh Albani has done it, I can do it, and then you give a hukam on the other scholar that he's not Salafi, because he's not following the scholarly opinion you want, because you have an attachment to Sheikh Yahya Hajuri, and then you leave hundreds of scholars who are greater in knowledge. Sheikh Yahya Hajuri, there's audios of him warning, I guess, some Indian Pakistani scholars because they allow voting or they cooperate with Jamahiyat Urath. So this is what I'm saying, you can take Sheikh Yahya Hajuri as the reference of the dawah. In the West, I have no issue. You understand? I respect this scholar. I love them all for Allah's sake. I don't have any city, in any arguments between youngsters. I only want good for them. I want them to sit together with scholars and reconcile. You understand? In London, Birmingham, wherever they have a disagreement, in America, New York, sit with the common good of scholars, reconcile, you understand? I'm not working for any group, any tanzim, in India, Pakistan, if two scholars are against each other, I can cooperate with both of them. You understand? I don't have to, if I work with someone, I don't work with the other one because they're falling out in a Jamaat or they have personal rivalities, you understand? I'm just, I'm not selling any good or anything for anyone else, you understand? I'm just, all the books I have translated, they're all books of refutation. You understand? I'm not there to make money. If I wanted to make money, I would do woman on the woman, or I would do tafsir. It will sell better. But all my books are ideological books of Ibn Taymiyyah, Jawab al-Bahr, Fatah Khur Abdal, Furqan bin Awliya. I'm not interested in this stuff. You understand? All I want is the youngsters to move forward, to be heads of big organizations like Aslafs. Like Aslaf, like Sheikh Dawood Ghaznavi. I want them to be like Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. I don't want them to be YouTubers or people who are just wasting their time. Qil wa qal, this one is off, this one is on, and this and that. This one is with my friend, this one is... And then they come up with the rules and people make fun of Salafiyah. Because, look, let's say there's a brother... No, you're saying this scholar, because he allowed doing rallies in England, he's innovator, but hundreds of scholars in India who are doing rallies against Modi, they're not innovators. The layman, then they're going to go to the Istiqlalis, to the Onis, and to this type of people. Because they're going to say, you guys, you're just fighting. If I was not Salafi before all this stuff, I would never follow. I'd say, what's going on with these people? You understand? If I hadn't learned before all this Aqidah, I would say, these guys, they're crazy. They're mad. They hate this scholar for doing rallies, and this one is okay for if you behave like this with the layman, they're gonna go mad. They say it's a circus. There's a brother, let's say his name is Daniel or his name is Mikhail. I don't want to go specific case. If you say this brother is okay, though he speaks against the ruler and he invites Deobandi on his platform, this brother is okay. This brother, let's say his name is Daniel or Mikhail. The problem is I don't want to go into specifics. But whenever you make a specific rulings, I guess, just specific to your Tanzim or your Masjid or your, I guess, an institute, then, you're going to make Salafi look bad. That this brother is okay, but he invites Deobandi, brother Daniel or brother Harry, John, whatever. But another scholar in London or Birmingham or India, Pakistan, he invites Deobandi, he's off the minhaj. He has to be written off, he has to be cut off. Look, if you do like this, people, they will hate Salafiyah. First of all, you're not qualified to issue fatwa on tabdi, and first of all, you're not even qualified in your 20s and 30s to speak about these issues. After, if you want to speak, and then you give different rulings to different scholars saying you can't do rally in India or in England, or who invite Deobandis on the platform, you say one, he can do it, brother Daniel, Harry, John, whatever. He's a good brother, you know, I love all these brothers. All those who speak against secularism, I love them and I respect them. But another scholar, because I have personal issues with him or I have personal rivalities with him, Allah knows best, you know. So when you will behave like this, then, you know, people are going to leave Salafi, and it's because of you they will go to those who you call wishy-washy, or, you know, you call them whatever. So at the end of the day, you have to do your own Islah, consult your elder scholars, and whatever disagreement you have in different cities, whether in India or in Dubai or in Morocco, Spain, sit with your elder scholars. You know, that's what I like with the Deobandis. They respect their elders. They kiss their hands. They carry their shoes. That's why I've never seen a youngsters among the Deobandi making a video against an elder. And even what I've seen with some Deobandis, I mean, I had some Deobandi teachers, by the way, you know, who were teaching in Al Hadith Madaris, and I love them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were Atharis, but they were Deobandis, and they studied in Medina universities. So you know, I respect, you know, those who are not muta'assib, and, you know, they respect our scholars and this and that. So, and I had some Deobandi teachers anyway. So, you know, I have seen in some WhatsApp group, I have seen some Deobandi brothers who are Asharis. You know, they said we're Asharis. And they were asking me for some books of Ahl Hadith scholars. Oh, you know, when is your scholar writing this? Because I love this scholar. I've seen last 20 years I have been benefiting with him and this. And I was like, oh my God, subhanallah. A Deobandi scholar, a Ash'ari scholar, he's respecting our scholars, and our youngsters are writing our scholars. They're not benefiting them. They're saying there's no Salafi scholars. And I was like, you know, so my view nowadays is I'd rather sit with the Deobandi who is mutawazin, he's not muta'assib, he doesn't curse Ahl Hadith. I'd rather have a cup of tea with him, even if he's Ash'ari, rather than sitting with the youngsters who call to be Salafi, and he criticizes Ahl Hadith scholars, he attacks Salamai Sanilai Zahir, he attacks, you know, our scholars for being part of doing poly. You know, obviously someone, you can criticize the fatwa of Ahl Hadith scholars. I have no issue if you do it with sincerity. You understand? If someone says, okay, you know, one of our scholars is doing rally, I don't agree with his political views or what he's doing, he's right. But then he says the same for the Saudi scholar. You understand? I have no issue. If someone generally serious, I mean, as a religion, he believes that doing a rally is haram, and doing politics is haram, and sitting in a conference with other group is haram. I mean, for him, because for him, the issue of boycott is not a tool. You know, for the Ahl Sunnah, boycott is a tool to deter the innovator. It's not the end by itself. You understand? When it's applied, like Prophet used it for the companions, it was to deter them. You understand? But when the Ahl Bidah majority, then there's no point. That's what the Salafi scholars have written, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah and others. So we understand boycott as a tool, not as an end in itself. So if someone understands boycott as an end in itself, okay, that's fine for me. You know, for me, that he doesn't look at the illah behind the hukm. For me, it's no problem. You know, someone is literalist. Some of them are leaning towards Ibn Hazm views and others. By the way, Ibn Hazm was Jahmina in Asma Sifat. That's another topic. But what I'm saying is, if someone says, for me, you know, boycott is an end in itself, it's not a tool to be applied depending on different situation, whether there is a maslaha or not. As long as he applies the same rulings on the Saudis and warns against them, and he warns against the Mufti of Saudi Arabia, he warns against all of them one by one, and says they don't know Salafiyah, only my little group. And he has to give the same fatwa. He has to say it is haram to study in Medina University, It is haram to study in Al-Qura University. It is haram to study in all universities who have Ashari and Maturidi teachers. If someone, and this is what is attributed to Sheikh Yahya Hajuri, and many students are saying that's what the students of Damaj is doing, I will respect your opinion. Because students of Damaj, they don't support secularism, they don't, so they're independent people. I like independent people, you understand? Like Sheikh Albani, sometimes he would criticize some issues. He was an independent, you understand? He doesn't give fatwa for one president or one king. Sheikh Albani, Sheikh Muqbil, I respect them, though I can disagree with some views of Sheikh Muqbil and others. Sheikh Yahya Hajuri, but I will respect, what I respect with them is the independence, you understand? But as long as the guy says, it's haram to study in Medina University, the Saudi scholar who was, it's haram for him to go to Al-Azhar because the Mufti Al-Azhar was in it. And he was sitting with Ahl Bid'ah and he was protecting them, and the Salaf didn't even look at the faces of innovators. I have no issue. Because he's doing it as a worship to Allah. He's not doing it as putting some scholars as above humans and the others treating the Indian Pakistani as dogs. Treating the Shami, the Misri, the Moroccan as a dog. You understand? If he does it like this, I have no issue. Respect, to you. That's your views. If you follow such views, I have no problems with you. But if you tell me the Indian Pakistani scholar, he's an innovator, we should not take knowledge from him, and he doesn't know Salafiyah because he invited a Deobandi scholar in his house, or he sat in a conference, or he got his book in, and Sheikh Albani was doing the same, and you don't give the same hukum on Sheikh Albani, or the Saudi scholar is doing the same. He's sitting with an Azhari scholar, he's sitting with an Ashari, he's sitting with Sheikh Abdullah ibn Baya, and you're not giving the same warning you have given on the Indian Pakistani, on the Shami, on the Indonesian, then this is when you're doing dhulam. And this is why it is better for you to leave the field of the da'wah, or at least, to let the elder scholars deal with these issues of warning and tabdi and hukam. Why are you putting yourself forward? Have you seen a young Deobandi putting himself above his elders? Have you seen a young Deobandi in his 20s, going forward above his scholars? So this is why my advice to the youngsters is sit with scholars. If you have a disagreement with your fellow Salafi scholars, instead of giving hukam and tabdi, make a committee of 20 scholars, like Sheikh Adnan Urur said to his opponents. He said to his opponent, if you differ with my rule, we can go to Sheikh Albani, we can go to Sheikh Ibn Baz any time. But his opponents refused to sit with him. Sheikh Abul Hasan Marabi, he said, my book is introduced by Sheikh Ibn Jibrin and Sheikh Ibn Uthaymin, that you can cooperate. No, you're telling me I can't do something Ibn Jibrin or Sheikh Ibn Uthaymin tell I can do. Why shall I take instruction for someone who is lower than Sheikh Ibn Jibrin or Sheikh Ibn Uthaymin? So, this is the problem with us. At the end of the day, those who don't want to cooperate, they are brothers. We love them we wish good for them. We don't want any harm. And if anything, an opponent comes and harm them, we will be the first to defend them. You understand? If any, these brothers if any, enemy of Islam attacks them or their family, we will be the first, like Ibn Taymiyyah. He had disagreement with Asharis, but any harm come to you, he was there. And he said to them when they passed away, he said, if you need anything to their family, I will be there for you. And this is how Salafiyah was spread. Even people who differed with him, they said he was a good man. Many of our scholars, they're respected by other masalik. They said, though we differ with them, but they were good people. They were honest people. They were not playing, games or having different rules for different people, or you understand? So this is how it should be. This is how it is. Salafiyah is about love and compassion, even for those who make mistakes. It's about explaining it to them. It's about being soft and kind. If your brother makes a mistake, try to sit with him, try to advise him, try to go to common group of scholars. Now, if you go to common 20 group of scholars, some they say you can share a platform with the scholars. Some they say no, then you can't force him to take an opinion on which the major scholars of our time, they differ. And you can't tell them to do something the major scholars they themselves go to Al-Azhar. You can't declare on a youngsters, he can't go on a TV channel because while our major scholars are going in India, Pakistan on TV channels and other schools of thought are invited. You understand? You have to be logical sometimes. So we only want good for brothers. We only want Islam. We want, when Ahl Sunnah are united, though we can have differences on election politics, on different issues. We can have differences. But when we are united, that's why we can help each other build more masajid. The Ash'ari Sufis, they look in big cities at the Darul Uloom they have built. Why? Because the youngsters, they don't go against them. They don't rebel against them, the youngsters. Our youngsters, they're like Ibn Hazm, I know the truth, and outside me, no one else understands. That's a problem when youngsters, they start becoming mujtahid, and they, everything nuktachini, every point they raise, that's a problem. Then you can't be big Darul Uloom like the others. You understand? You have at least all those who have the correct aqidah, if they can have some working relation between themselves, though they can disagree, at least, they waste their time on refuting Jibril Fuad Haddad, or refuting, all this type of people, you understand, the Ahbash, or there is the Tafweed, the Tafweed is, they're spreading Tafweed, or they're spreading other issues. These are more important to be refuted than, this one sits with this one, who sits with this one, who sits with this institute, and we should boycott them all, and the one, what games are you playing? People are leaving Salafiyah is because of you. It's because they see you giving a different ruling on brother Daniel or brother Mikhail, who invites Deobandi, and you're giving a different ruling for someone else. You're not giving the same fatwa of ruling for the Saudis sitting with Deobandis, or inviting Taqi Usmani, and you're giving a different ruling for the Pakistani. No Pakistani will accept his scholars to be considered as dogs or humans. You're saying, so the Saudi scholar, he can go in the European Council, but the Pakistani Indian can't go? No, Ghayur al-Hadith will accept you treat his scholars as under humans and as dogs. You understand? So no one accepts justice. And anyway, I'm going to end up this. I have read you that Sheikh Habibur Rahman Azabi, Sheikh Albani hosted him many days. I have showed you that Sheikh Albani, his audio, he said you can cooperate in an Ash'ari in the field of da'wah. So I say to young brothers, who some of them are lawyers, they're doing other jobs, don't pressurize the Medina students. Don't go on TV, don't go on this channel, that's not your role to pressurize them. That's the role of that's the role of a scholar. And these students, if they want to go to international conferences, work for forums, they can get fatwa for major scholars anyway. If in America they want to work and become leaders like Malcolm X, don't stop their progress in the society. You understand? If you can't go to this forum or that forum because there's Ash'aris in it. Don't stop that. If you don't want to, don't do it. But don't stop the other people's progress and working for the Ummah, for the oppressed African brothers, for the oppressed Hispanic brothers in America. Don't stop them from joining a political party. Don't stop them going far away on the radio channel if he's invited by Nashari to tell what Hanbalism is, or what's the Athari Aqid. Don't stop him doing his da'wah with softness and reaching the Salafi call other platforms, TV channels, radios, or fiqh forums. Don't stop him. You understand? If he's got a good job in a fiqh council, with the money he can get from this income, he can help the da'wah. Why are you stopping having an income? You're a lawyer, you have a good income. When you have a shop, a customer in your lawyer shop, he's Deobandi Ash'ari, you still sell him your products. So you're not, you're making rules for students of knowledge, but your own shop, if you have a grocery shop or you're selling Hajj products, you will sell your Hajj services to Deobandi or to Hanafi or to Brelvi. If you're a doctor, you will sell your services to, but the Salaf said not to treat an innovator. The Salaf said not to sell to an innovator. But for them, in the normal business of the people, the rest carries on, but the scholar, the student of knowledge, he has to reject some income for working in a fiqh council because of your understanding. He can't be a leader, have an influence in the society, go in a meeting in which there's the presidents, kings of countries. If he goes in a national conference in America, there's the senators, and then tomorrow if he wants to open a madrasa, it will be easier for him if they see him as a good person, as a non-hostile, someone who wants the integration, someone who is a positive person, And, people identify Salafiyah with extremism. So, having good links with politicians, going to different meetings, places in which there's kings, presidents, senators. What's wrong with it? You understand? So this is why I'm saying to the youngsters, calm down. Let the elders, the most elder scholars in the country deal with these different issues. And don't pressurize Medina scholars from becoming leaders. We want them to become leaders. Because if they become leaders, the Awnis, the Istiqlalis, all these people, Tafwidi people, the layman won't go to them. You understand? But if you stop their progress, and you don't stop the progress of the Saudi scholars sitting with the Asharis, bin Bayah, for them, you don't stop their progress, and you're just stopping the progress of the Pakistanis or the others, that's a problem. You understand? If you say the Saudi can work in the Fiqh Council, no one is forcing him. The Fiqh Council, the Saudi scholar, it's not an obligation. You understand? It's a job. It's a private, I'm not saying it's a private, it's funded by government, but it's not a government job. He can always reject it and go and teach in Madrasa in India, Pakistan. You understand? Jamia Salafa Banaras, they invited Sheikh Albani to be teachers, but he said because of some issues I can't go to India. So, there's many universities around the world. No Saudi teachers is forced to work for the Fiqh Council of the Muslim World League or others. No one, is forcing him. You understand? It's something he chooses. It's an option for him whether to be member of a Fiqh Council, European Fiqh Council or not. So, and it's a field of da'wah. It's a semi-private organization. So now if there's a Jamia Ulama Islam, no one is forcing the scholars in India, Pakistan to be part of it. But since its foundation, they have been the heads of Jamia Ulama Islam. So they were from original member Sheikh Sanawala Amritsari to Sheikh Abdul Wahab Arabi was the head of Jamia Ulama Islam. And no one is forcing them. It's not obligatory. But they're still doing it for the betterment on common issues. The scholars have been doing it since ages and centuries. From the Hanbali Salafis to the others. So this is, I will end up on this because I've been going long and all the details are the fatwa. And now if someone says Sheikh Albani changed his view, then you can't just say he changed his view. You have to produce. Sheikh Albani has to say, in my audio in which I said you can't cooperate with the Nashari in the field of dawah, now I take this statement back. This is, people say, oh, he changed his view from a general statement. You can't do like this. You have to bring a specific statement, like his statement with Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi. You have to, 14 minutes, no, he has to say what I told to Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi. No, I'm coming back on it. Okay, then I can say he has done ruju. And his own students put it on Kull al-Salafiyin. You understand his statements, you can cooperate. Only, you understand? So if his own students, they don't know if he has done ruju or not, who's going to know it? You understand? You can't say Sheikh Ismail Salafi, Hafiz Gondelvi, they have changed their views. Because their children, grandchildren and others, and other of the students, they quote their fatwa. On cooperating. So if their own students and their own families, they don't know that their fathers or grandfathers' views, then it's a problem somewhere. We can sit with the 20 of his students and discuss. You understand? It's no problem. If someone makes a mistake, he can always be corrected if you produce the evidence. That a scholar, his fatwa on Bir wa Taqwa, he changed his view. But this fatwa of Ibn Simin, Ibn Baz, the present, now to tell them they have changed their view, they have to say, okay, my fatwa I've wrote before, now I have changed my view. Or before I allowed going in the Muslim Council because I went with Al-Azhar, now I've changed my view. And some are doing it today as well. Or Sheikh Ibn Jibrin, Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, they say, okay, we introduced the book of Sheikh Abul Hasan Maribi, which says you can cooperate, now we have changed our mind. There must be an official statement that the books we introduced which said you can cooperate, our fatwa which we wrote in this magazine which says you can cooperate on Bir wa Taqwa, but you don't excuse each other, now we're coming back on this fatwa. Or Sheikh Abdul Razak Afifi, whatever that's, or this is how you have to say they have changed their mind. You can't just say, oh, they have changed their minds because this or that reason. That's not that's not like how it works. The statement Sheikh Albani must say, okay, before I used to, you can't just do nasakh, like this is mansukh and this. You can't just say this. You have to bring a statement. Before I used to allow cooperating with the Ash'aris in the field of da'wah, now I don't allow it anymore. Or I gave this fatwa before. Now I'm taking to Abul Hasan Maribi, now take it back. Now this is, I will say, okay, the scholar before, he had some views. You could cooperate, now he changed his views. And there's hundreds of other scholars doing the same, which for us are greater than, and same level anyway. So I will just end on this. Wa sallallahu ala nabi.